they can watch it later. Thanks everyone for joining. I know it's last minute, so we are recording, and you can let folks know who weren't able to make it that it was recorded, and I'll send out where the link is later. But thanks for joining. I wanted to introduce Steve Terada. Steve is from the Office of Economic Revitalization in the City and County of Honolulu, and it's the Community Programming and Outreach Group. So Steve, and he has his teammates here with him. And so I'm going to ask Steve to introduce them, but then we have just two things on the agenda for today in the hour. One is pretty excited. The city is had an announcement that they're opening up that small business relief and recovery program that was successful through the federal credit unions in town, several of the federal credit unions. They put more money in there to help small businesses, so that's great. But also Steve's team is here because they also want to hear from all of you as to what would help you during this time. So please be open and share with them because they really want to help. And I think we're all in this together. So with that, Steve, if you want to introduce your team and take it from there.
Sure. Hi, I'm Steve Terada, and our team members on this meeting today are Jill Chapman, Reid Uyehara, Charmaine Reyes, Wendy Lopes, and Kim Randall. All five of them are in our business educator program, which is part of a larger business support program that our office has been building since we opened in July. And we do conduct outreach. In this case, yesterday's very huge announcement about a large increase in funding and the change in conditions to apply for the Small Business Relief and Recovery Fund makes it worthwhile to have these types of information webinars. And we will probably have several more within the city. So you're actually the first one that we are having this with. That's because David's email was from last night and it was for today's meeting, so he got in the front door. The mayor's announcement was to say that the fund is increasing by $75 million. And what's noteworthy about it, because I know in the news, there are questions about whether the city and the state are spending CARES Act money and will we spend it by the end of December. I wanted to let you know that with this new increment of funding, this tranche of $75 million, the Small Business Fund goes up to $135 million. And I'll show you something. This is what the original proposal was by the city in terms of how the CARES Act money would be spent. The top line is for community services, and you see small business included in there. So there's a large chunk of CARES Act money that is dedicated for small business. That's in the top line. And the amount now in the Small Business Relief and Recovery Fund is $135 million. So that has moved along very, very well. The important point about qualifications, because I don't know how many of the members have participated in the fund so far. What's noteworthy is that there is an elimination criteria for number of employees. In the past, if a business was looking into the program but had too many employees, that requirement has been eliminated. The threshold now is gross annual revenue, up to 2 million and over 2 million. Up to 2 million opens up on September 21st with no staffing minimum or maximum. There is no staffing consideration. And for that level of gross income, a small business can look at a maximum of $20,000 in grants. That's how the numbers lay out. As the gross income, annual gross income increases, then the amount of grant goes up $10,000
Join the meeting.
per $1 million annual increase in income, up to $5 million. And as I mentioned, above $2 million and above, that will open up on October 1st. And what's really important is if now you have businesses who can go back and qualify under the 2 million or over the 2 million, you get your documentation squared away. Vince from Aloha Pacific Federal Credit Union actually participated in the mayor's press conference and went over the importance of documenting your files properly. And there are a number of reasons for that. Number one is credit unions expect to be swamped when they reopen on September 21st and when they move to October 1st tranche. If your application is not complete, remember you have some overworked loan officers there. I'm not saying that they would, but there's a tendency if your file is not complete, they'll put it on the side while they work on the next one. You don't want that to happen. You want them to look at your file and be able to move it on for approval. The program typically calls for approval within 3 working days and funding within 7 working days. I think you have to be a little more realistic if they're overwhelmed when they reopen on September 21st and October 1st. Those dates may slide. I think you have to be patient with that. But the things that are under your control would be your documentation and getting your package in perfect shape. So there's a lot of information on the website, and I wanted to just show you a few things that you can find there. The FAQ has really good information. There are actually 3 different things. Okay. Oh. I must have closed out some of my files, sorry. But the point I'd like to make is that if you go to oneoahu.org and you start looking for the information, there is a wealth of detailed information so that you do not have to try to contact the credit union, because the system is set up that you need to know the last 2 numbers in your gross excise tax license, and then your application will go to one of the program credit unions. They will be your lender, so to speak, for your application. So many of us have our own credit unions. This is not the way the program works. You'll be directed to specified credit unions who have a lot of experience. They've processed a lot of these grants. There have been about 5,600 successful grants in this program. So the credit unions have a lot of experience in processing applications. David, let me stop right here and to see if you or any of the members have any questions.
You know, Steve, there was a question that came in earlier, not specifically to what you mentioned, but somebody who wasn't able to attend. Their question was, if they prepaid their rent October, November, December, can they submit that now? So if they have like a canceled check, is that sufficient evidence and is that allowable?
And they're applying October 1st? Or
they would
now?
be applying September 21st. So they're just prepaying it and they can show that they've expended the money. It's just that it covers them through December.
David, I don't know the answer to that. I would have to find out and get back to your group on it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, one thing that I wanted to point out is in the program write-up and the reasons for getting reimbursements. One second.
I have a question after.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I
Sorry, I'm
lost
not
that
sure.
file. Yep, go ahead, please.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm in my car, so I'm not sure if you can hear me too well. But will the date from which we can start with the receipts, is that still going to be March 20th, or is the date going to be a later date?
It's still March 20th, and you just need to double check that you did not receive any type of reimbursement for the older expenses through PPP or EIDL or anything else, because there is no redundancy in that. So just make sure
Right.
that this is the first time that you're claiming reimbursement for those expenses.
Okay. And then, I just forgot. Sorry, I just forgot my follow-up question. Sorry, I'll have to ask later.
We'll still be here, don't worry.
Thank you.
But David, what I wanted to mention, and I don't have it, it's on the website. If you take a look at the allowable types of expenses, the general category is, of course, it needs to be COVID-19 related. But I call it some of the pivoting expenses. For example, if you need to now do carryouts, or you deliver, or you need to do something on the website, and this is forced by business conditions caused by COVID-19. I double checked with the credit union this morning, and those with the proper documentation can be allowable expenses. So I know that in your work, you discuss a lot about pivoting and looking at different sources of revenue. So when you look at what it costs to do that, you should compare it with what the program requirements are and see if some of the additional expenses may now be reimbursable besides your rent, utilities, and payroll.
That's terrific. That's terrific, Steve. Awesome. Thank you. That's really good information. I mean, because there's so much that fits into that category, as you can imagine,
Yeah,
because, you know, business is being, you know, really devastated right now. So thanks for that.
Okay. Those are the highlights that I wanted to mention, that over 2 million now under consideration, eliminated the personnel requirements, the type of expenses that you may want to consider, and the fact that we expect the credit unions to be really busy. So to get your package lined up and ready to submit when the gates open, that's our strong recommendation.
Okay. So hopefully everybody here, you know, on this has their packets ready to go. Let me see. I got some questions that came in through the chat. Yep, everything can go back to March 20th as long as you haven't claimed it through another CARES Act type of program. Is this program for Oahu businesses only? Yes, right? This is City and County of Honolulu?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and oneoahu.org, Small Business Relief Fund. Question, can marketing costs leading up to the shutdown be included? I guess if the question, I mean, I guess if Steve, I understand this, as long as the marketing was related to the impact of COVID, then, so the crux of this is that the money is used to support businesses that were adversely impacted by COVID. Is that correct?
That's correct. So I think in general terms, it would fall within the area of consideration. The credit unions, first of all, there are 4 different credit unions, and you can imagine each one will look at packages just a little differently, just like 4 different banks. Banks will look at your loan packages a little differently. So the best thing that you can do is to really have the story behind why you're claiming that expense. And if it seems as if it is in a gray area or controversial, David, you know, as a banker, they should write a clear explanation and a story why they are submitting that particular expense. You don't really have to do that for some of the normal things that are there. If you're paying rent, then your rent receipts and the documentation that goes with it, you know, would be what they want. But if it is a type of expense that could go either way, you really should explain why you believe this is COVID-19 related and why this should be a reimbursable expense, and then turn it in to the credit union and see what they say.
Okay. That's good. I think, you know, when I spoke to one of the credit unions, just so, you know, I think it's along the lines of what Steve is saying, they spent about 75% of the time, if you want to call it, you know, just processing in following the back and forth, not having the right documentation and backup. And so that's where this bottleneck happens, you guys. So if you have your documentation all very clearly labeled, notated, if you need to, why it's there, you know, very clean, your document, your packet will go into the, you know, quickly process pile. If it goes into the one that they have to follow up with a phone call or some other contact mechanism, you can imagine that pile gets bigger and bigger every day, which means it takes longer and longer to get to you. So the cleaner your packet, the faster you're going to go through, which I think is pretty, you know, stands to reason, right? Like that's normally how these things work.
Hey, one more thing I'd like to mention, David, that of course there are 5,000 something approved applications. There are quite a few applications that were not approved. So we've have an agreement with Aloha Pacific Federal Credit Union that our team will start to contact the folks or the businesses that were not successful in getting their applications through. And
Terrific.
if there are reasons to try and move them back to the credit union, and if they need language resources, you know, foreign language help or whatever, we'll try to direct them to the right resources and then push them back to the credit union so they get back into play. So I just wanted to mention for your group, I don't know if you have any organizational members who were not successful in getting SBRRF grants, or if they know other businesses who were not successful and thought they should be. Frankly, let them contact me, because we'll go down the list, but you never know how long it will take to get to them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Some more questions came into the chat, so I'm just going to read some of these out, Steve and team. And for those of you and the others that are kind of just waiting out there, the second half of this Zoom call, as you know, Steve and team want to hear from you. So you might be starting to think, what are your top 3 things you would think would really be helpful to you and your business from the city? You know, how can the city help you? So as you're thinking about that, someone here had said that they received the EIDL loan, the EIDL loan, and they're saving some of the loan to help us along the way. Can we still apply for this? So I think the answer is yes. It's just that you can't double dip, correct, Steve?
Correct.
So it has to be for uses that you can't, you know, obviously use it for the same thing. But yes, you can still apply for this for other expenses that were not covered by your EIDL. Let's see here. Actually, just a clarification, Steve. So EIDL has both the grant and the loan component. Does it matter? I mean, in terms of uses?
I don't know. I'd have to get back to you on that one too.
Okay.
Second question.
Okay. All right. Another question. If we already applied and received first round, do we need to submit all the docs again aside from the new receipts?
You know, that's a question for the credit union. I think they would want complete packages, but I don't want to speak for them.
Okay.
And again, each credit union has a little different way of doing their business. So, I mean, there's no downside to getting your complete package put together. And if you had to photocopy some of the stuff that you did before, you're not duplicating the expense request for the same expense, but some of the information could be photocopied from the original packet, added to the new expense documentation for packet number 2. There is absolutely no downside to do that.
Okay. Another question is, are the rules on over 2 million in revenue and is the cap 5 million?
You mean, are there different rules than for under 2 million? Is that the question?
Are the rules on over 2 million in revenue available? And that's question 1. And then there's a part 2, which is the cap 5 million?
Second question first, the cap is 5 million.
And then the rules for the over 2 million, I guess it's not available, or it's not. I'm not seeing.
You know, I'm thinking back to the way that we presented it. Okay, I'll confirm it, but I'm pretty sure the rules are consistent all the way through.
Okay.
I'll confirm that for you.
Okay. So basically, it's 2 million to 5 million in revenue is what you're saying, and the question is, are the rules exactly the same from the 2 to 5 million as it is the sub 2 million in revenue? Okay.
David, I think Charmaine also put a link in the chat for people to link on. That might answer some of the questions. Thanks,
cool.
Charmaine.
Awesome. Thanks, Charmaine. Yep. See it here. oneoahu.org and then /small-business. Okay. Okay. So Steve, if there are any other questions that come in later, do you mind if I email those to you?
No, please do so.
Okay. So even if you didn't have a burning question right now that you wanted to put in the chat or jump out here, because we do want to leave time for Steve and team to ask you folks, get your input now. You can email it to me, okay? And then I will make sure to get it to them so that you can get your questions answered.
And David, one more thing about information sessions. I'm positive we will have at least one information session before October 1st. I'll make sure that your group gets the link invitation to participate, because
thank you.
In that session, we will have the credit union folks. So they're much better able to answer the day-to-day, the small questions that I cannot.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. Well, we just appreciate you guys were ready to jump on so quickly, and I know the announcement was like yesterday, so thank you and your team, and we just appreciate whatever information you give us, because we're just trying to prepare for everybody the mad rush on Monday. So okay.
Of course, thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, let's switch gears then. And Steve and team, what would you like input from this group on?
We envision that our business educators will be doing outreach to businesses by phone, virtual. We may have Zoom type conferences, and also actually making physical site visits when it's appropriate to do so. We'd like to do that by appointment if possible. So one of our first questions that came up is, maybe the businesses want to see us as well, but we're trying to figure out how to best contact businesses. For example, to have a conversation over the phone, to talk about our menu of services, or to arrange an appointment where we may go out and continue that conversation more in depth. So how do we reach the business folks is our first question.
Anybody? How do you want to be contacted? Is that the idea about the city, about services that are available?
From our perspective, we're attending sessions like these. We had a 2-hour session with SBA yesterday. We've done many of these. So our business educators have been accumulating knowledge, resources on where to direct people, and they would like to engage small business, listen, and then say, okay, well, there is a menu of services, and this is what it is. Either are you interested in any of these, we can direct you to them, or do you want some kind of recommendation on this, on what you can look at, such as there are training courses and so forth that we're aware of. So that kind of engagement, we haven't polished because this is the first time this business educator outreach program will ever be done. So we're learning as we go, and I don't mind saying that. So if your group can help us learn and become better and help the small business community, it would be greatly appreciated.
What do you folks think? Well, maybe we can start with format. Like how do Zoom, our Zoom, because my group, Steve, we meet all by Zoom. We don't meet in person at all. So I would probably be confident in saying that for the folks who are on here are very comfortable reaching out via like some kind of Zoom or webinar type of format, or like a room like we're having right now. But the other question, I guess, would be, what about the other formats? Would people be open or desirous of in-person gatherings? What do you folks think?
I like the idea of having a more intimate conversation, like a smaller setting. So instead of like, because everybody seems to have different situations and you may not always want to expose yourself to like, okay, here's my situation. If maybe we could book, maybe 5 or 10 minutes of your time to have that like detailed, kind of question answer scenario, if that would be something they would be willing to offer.
Okay, and that would be on site that you're thinking about?
No, it could be just like this. Like even
like
if there's
this?
like a Meetup Genius or something where you could like, here's all of our times and you can like pick, here's my 5
Right.
minutes, and like a rolling
Right.
Zoom call that people are coming in and out of.
Right.
Office hours almost, yeah?
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
so we could start it off, for example, with a more general Zoom call and, talk about some of the different services, the menu, and for those that are interested, we can drill down and have smaller, more intimate and shorter conversations by Zoom, or we use WebEx at the city, same thing. But that is very possible to do.
Steve, it's Carrie. In case some businesses aren't sure what the meeting would entail, why don't you give maybe an example of kind of some of the things you would cover or offer?
Okay. There are 2 main components to our business educator program. The first is to help businesses adopt and stay with the best practices for COVID-19. And so our business educators are very well versed on the book side. For example, the proclamations and CDC type of basic requirements for industries. They know that. I see that your folks may already know the basic CDC requirements. Those will not change that readily. But what may change are the nuances in a proclamation, and of course, stay-at-home orders, definitions of essential businesses and things like that, that generate a lot of calls to our call center. So as the rules change, we are going to be able to help explain the rule at the time, the new rule. That's one of the main things that we'd like to help with. That's the education part. And that, of course, is connected to safety best practices. The second part would be from business consulting. As I mentioned, meetings with SBA and numerous other organizations, consulting organizations, language organizations, etc., will give us a suite of options in the event that a small business, frankly, doesn't have time to go study these things because you're busy trying to make a living and keeping your place open and clean. So we can help with presenting the menu of options and information and resources. And if you don't need any of that, terrific. But if you do, we can explain where you can find more information and who do you go to, who you talk to, and things like that.
In today's world, Steve, a small business would almost have to triage this themselves. They would have to know where to go, call various organizations. So it sounds like what you're going to do is be the one-stop shop to assist the City and County of Honolulu small businesses.
Exactly. And, it's an interesting discussion that I had with David by email, because we're adding layer and layer of knowledge. Because my question to David, the kind of work that he does and what you're doing is pivoting. So I asked if there are some general guidelines, pivoting guidelines, that are pivoting guidelines as well as pivoting resources, whether they be legal or if you need to follow new Department of Health rules, if you're changing the type of service and so forth. And we'd like to know that. So as we speak to other businesses who are not that akamai on pivoting, that's in our menu of services, additional information.
I think that's great. Thank you.
I think, Steve, one of the things that helps, I notice when we have these groups and we talk with it, is case studies, examples, right? So let me give you an example. Is like, just when you brought up that point of a business that pivots, are they aware of the rules or regulations now that they are encroaching upon because of their pivot, right? It might be useful to have an example of like a business and what kind of rule they now encounter as a result of a pivot, right? So that kind of stuff, information, is really helpful, especially industry specific. But even, I know there's so many different industries, it can get kind of a lot, but even at a higher level, just say, here's an example of a business, they pivoted, and then they kind of ran into this new regulatory or compliance concern that they weren't aware of. And here's the information they really needed for that pivot. Something like that would be, I think, very useful.
It sure sounds like it. And that sounds like an assignment for our business educators.
Mm. What other questions? Or what other things would you like to know from our group, Steve and team?
Actually, I thought that you were going to explain to me what some of the things that you wanted us to find out for you.
I've got a lot that I pull the thread across a lot of different businesses. Before I go into that, does anybody want to this is your chance. Here you go. You got the City and County of Honolulu right here. They're asking you, what do you need support with during this difficult time? And I would just ask that when you answer, let's avoid the ones that are obvious already, right? Which is like we need more cash. Okay, so let's get past it. Let's get into the mindset of how do we be stronger. What would help you?
I have a question. My name is Anne, and I'm in the healthcare business, and I was wondering, healthcare or not healthcare, whatever business you have, is there a resource space for us to be able to secure certain PPE or get help if we are unable to secure PPE on our own? Because I know that there have been many donations made, to the city or to the state, and they have basically have it on the side for organizations and hospitals, of course, and first line. But as far as essential workers, is there any way to possibly be able to get into some of that?
This is clinical level PPE that you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah. But I guess even if there's, certain retail or small business owners who are considered essential and they're having a hard time getting it. So I guess it's kind of a two-part question. But for me, yes, I am in healthcare. So yeah, it'd be more clear.
Yeah. The first part I'm pretty vague on. I know that I've spoken to our emergency services folks, and they stockpile. They pay a lot of money for a warehouse for the healthcare industry in terms of the PPE. And how they determine who gets that, I don't know. The second part, small businesses, your regular small businesses who have either had trouble getting PPE or, it busts the budget to go out and get another supply of PPE when I could spend a couple $1,000s on keeping a part-time employee so that I can make more sales. And what we're trying to do in our larger business support program that I described to David, that one day we'd like to give a presentation to your group, is to distribute free PPE from the city. And one of the models that we were looking at is, it's not approved, it's a proposal, but one of the models that we were looking at is what the city of Denver did. They put together a PPE package in a program, and they delivered it. So, I have a proposal on my desk for a copycat system from Denver, and the first 5,000 small businesses will get a free PPE kit. That's the kind of thing that we would like to do using some of the CARES Act money. But I don't have an approved proposal. I don't have anything approved yet. It's just something that we're working on, and we'd like to go there and do that, because we realize that it's really different in terms of PPE needs. I've had Zoom sessions with larger businesses who said, there's no problem with PPE. We have lots of PPE. We can go out and get them. But smaller businesses may say, yes, we can go out and get them, but the local distributors may give us really limited supply. Even though we asked for 3 months, they may give us 1 month supply. In fact, that's what the distributors told me. And furthermore, if you spend money on that PPE, then you can't spend money on something else that's equally critical for a small business. But we'd like to help the small businesses, especially with distribution of PPE. It's a goal of ours, it's something we're working on, but I have nothing concrete to report at this time, because I know I'm being recorded.
So, what comes to mind, Steve, which is interesting. I know you folks have a ton of proposals of people with good intention of figuring out how to allocate some of the CARES Act money, right, that the government sits on, and figures out how to parse out. What just came to mind is it would be interesting if you would have small business owners who could register online. And then if someone were to summarize these proposals, you could have people vote. And so you would be able to know exactly what is, interesting to the small businesses. So is this something you guys have already talked about doing?
I hear you. We're gonna use the programs in place of the politicians. So I think that's a good idea,
Hey, grassroots, man. But you know what I mean? It's sort of like what you're asking us is qualitative focus group stuff, right? And
Yes.
and what I'm proposing is do a quantitative survey, and you'll get it, and you'll get 70% of the people said do this.
Yeah. Frankly, I like the outcome of that. It's just nobody will buy it here in my office.
Thank you so much. And I really, really appreciate what the city and county is doing with this reimbursement relief refund program. It's been really, really helpful. So it's actually the best program that's helped my business out. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Steve, can I ask you a quick question? So my name is Samantha, and I run we currently have pivoted, and we've taken our remote learnings, computer science related classes, and they're mostly all online. But that seems to be all after school because kids are still having to do their online learning in the mornings. But parents still have the problem of how to support their child for distance learning in the mornings, you know, that 8 o'clock to 2:30 hour for all you parents out there, you know. And so we pivoted and we started offering distance learning support services. And when we look at the cost of how much that we have to pay in order to support that, it's a big number. And we're having the same problems as even the YMCA. The YMCA couldn't get their numbers down to be something with the minimum wage that we have to pay people to help, and the PPE and the cleaning supplies and the rent and all that. It just doesn't boil down because we can only have small numbers. So to make this a profitable business is really tricky. So the good thing though is that the Department of Human Services are trying to open up, you know, with the CARE program and offering grants to families. So I think for me, what I need is I need somebody to help my customers. So I want to be able to send them to somebody to say, here's how you fill out this application to get money for your family, so that they can then spend the money to let us help them care for their children. So I guess what I'm saying is that yes, we need help, but I need to find help for my customers to make their lives a little bit easier.
Samantha, so the places that your customers would go to would be your Aloha United Way, Catholic Charities, and the community-based organizations that offer these the programs that will help subsidize that type of activity. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I believe there are already grants available for families through the, I'm on the COVID information resources page for the Department of Human Services, for like child care services. So parents can already apply, but I think there's a lot of funding out there. And I think, I mean, whether it's to the small businesses, but remember it all trickles around, right? As soon as they get money, then it can come back to the small businesses. And I'm just saying, I think we need to be able to be helping our customers so that it helps us. And I guess if there is some kind of resource that I can say, hey, families, we know you're struggling. Here, let us help you. And then you're helping them by helping us, if that makes any sense at all.
Right. You know, I want to tell you, that's something I personally thought of that I do not have a solution for, because we've been trying to organize from the small business perspective, all of the different, the random information that's out there in the universe, and pull them all together and use the oneoahu.org as a gateway type place. I think that your question I would have to take to one of our other departments who would be at the forefront of working with some of the other needs, and who actually work with the community-based organizations for those purposes that help families that are non-business related. Because it would be out of my purview, and there's nothing that I can do. So I would have to sort of switch tracks here and go ask them about that. And I can get an answer back to you after I talk to them. So I will do that and see if I can get a response to David on this question.
Sure. And I think that's probably a lot of everybody on this call, that we're struggling because our customers are struggling, right? Our customers need money to be able to come to us, but yet, you know, no matter how much money we get, it's depleting. And so we need them to get the ball rolling again. So I think I think our solution is helping them so that they can help us rather than just helping us. We want to be able to bring us all together as a whole again.
Hey, Samantha, let me ask you this question. So are you familiar with the HHRF from the city, the Household Relief Fund? And are your customers familiar with that one? Do you know?
I'm reading about it now. It doesn't, HHRF in Honolulu. I'll look. Yes. I am familiar with this one. And this is one we were trying on our own to try to organize parents to come in. Like, I mean, we don't know a whole lot about it, but we were trying to educate ourselves so that we can invite parents to come in and help them get the applications together. But I mean, we're just winging it. So if there was somebody who's like, oh yeah, we already know how this works, then let them, we could host them and literally help them fill out applications, and rather than like, oh, just read the link and follow it. A lot of people are not as tech savvy as we would hope and can read this and know exactly what they need to do. So we wanted to be more hands-on helping them.
Right. I need to ask a question of the department that manages that program. There are a couple of things about that. At the press conference, the director of that office mentioned 2.5 million out of 25 million has been dispersed over a number of months. So there's a lot of capacity in that program to fund more families. The information about the fund, including application type information, is available. OER, our office, hosted a webinar because of the bar closing of the bars. So we had, we invited people, the names that we got from the Liquor Commission and their families, and we hosted an info session on the Small Business Relief Fund and the Household Fund, because we know that there are different categories of people that were affected. So we can probably do the same thing. I think that the department that manages this probably goes out and does outreach, but perhaps a little more suggestions in terms of where they could do outreach. They may want that. So I will talk to them, and that's part of the response I'll get back through David.
Okay. Well, David, you know how to reach us. If we can help host something like that, we would love to.
That'd be awesome, Samantha. Thank you. Bronson he's been patiently raising his blue digital hand over there. So Bronson.
Hey, thanks, David, and thank you, Steve and team, for this webinar. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
My name is Bronson Chang. I'm co-founder with Uncle Clay's House of Pure Aloha, and yeah, you know, just giving some thought to the question of how to support businesses. This is just my perspective on it. You know, I think that obviously we appreciate the short-term support and the grants that help us to stay afloat during these challenging times. But I think working, you know, in all the conversations I have with David, it's about more than the short-term needs, but really how do we facilitate generating new value through collaboration, and how do we position for sort of the new economy that we live in and is coming into the future. So my ask is there a way to increase sort of transparency around the information the city and county is collecting in a way that we can start to have more dots on the map to see where these collaborative opportunities may exist. There's some things that David and I have been talking about and working on within even our mastermind groups, such as identifying what like the key needs are of businesses and matching them with the key offers, and basically not operating so much in the silo of just what we're doing now and getting by today, but you know, how do we use collaboration to generate, you know, more innovation in a way that positions our businesses and reinvents our businesses for the future.
Mm-hmm. Great question. And I think you probably are involved with a project that David is working on, Small Business Resource Network. David, that Small Business Resource Network with Jacob, as I mentioned in the email, was downsized in order to move that forward. But that organization has the potential to do some of the matching that we're just talking about, because it would be a dedicated small business resource network. You have the resource providers, but the complementary part of that is who do you provide to? And there could be a process in place, because it's a new concept, by the way, here. That SBRN is a proven concept in Portland, Oregon, but it'll be the first time here in Honolulu. It would have to be fleshed out and added layers of value, put into that program to approach what you just said. How do you match up? Where do you find the transparency? You need more transparency in terms of what's available, and basically enabling the conversation so that there is a matching of resource and needs. How does that happen? And we haven't done a lot of that in our city. So it's a new thing that needs to be developed, a new concept, and it has to be adopted. But where do you stake out your first spot? And in my opinion, the SBRN, Small Business Resource Network, could be one of them, one of the places where we start and you develop it and you grow it and you make it into something that is really useful for small businesses. So that's the extent of my knowledge in terms of how we can match up the resources while increasing transparency and adding value. That's my thought on it.
You know, Steve, what's happening, like in one of the mastermind groups who are collaborating together, these business owners, it even goes to the place of assets. So one business owner says, you know what, I got a freezer, I don't use it anymore, who wants it? So it's like a Craigslist, where now it's shared resources, right? Mm-hmm. And they're just helping each other. Say, hey, bro, you don't need to go and buy a new fridge or freezer. Just take mine. As long as you're willing to come pick it up, take mine. That's all part of this, right? So it's connecting the people, the subject matter experts, but sometimes it just could be like, I gotta spare something, Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, especially because we're an island community, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But even though we're on the island, one island, I see multiple clusters instead of one big cluster, because the smaller the cluster, the greater the trust. And that's really important, especially during the most difficult times.
True. I appreciate that, Steve. I wonder if there's any crossover as I see you guys go into, this data collection process of interviewing and, pointing people in the right direction. That's a very rich data collection process that may, have overlap with building out that resource network.
It would seem so, but I will tell you that in the business community, as we have gone out and talked about our different programs and trying to collect information about what businesses are doing so that we can be helpful. The question of confidentiality and what are you going to use the information for has come up consistently. So we are very, very careful about that. I cannot say that we would use any information that we collected in a given way, because we would want to get the permission of the people who provided that information. So that's the comment that I make about something that seems to make sense, very logical. You use information so that you can allocate resources better and help people. But the other side is the fear of misuse of information and the confidentiality issues.
Steve, it's Carrie again. I have one more question.
Sure.
When you talk about small business, what is the focus? What revenue size of business?
What's really funny is we had a Q&A, I think, with retail merchants, and the question came up, and we have Uyehara as a consultant, so they were on that, and said, well, nominally, we'll use the 500 employees or less, kind of a threshold. But in my mind, it's not necessarily so. I mean, it could fluctuate. So I never use a number of employees in terms of defining who we're talking about. I just don't, because I think it tends to pin us down a little bit, and I don't want to do that.
When you talk small business, quote unquote, you're really talking about anyone who's doing business in Hawaii.
Yes, although I need to qualify this, that we receive numerous questions about, why doesn't the city have grant program for home-based businesses. And it's just policy decisions and how the mayor would like, where the funds would like to go based on his own beliefs, how to best use the CARES Act money. So far, we have not included home-based businesses in any of the grant programs.
So Steve, we're right up till 12:30. I want to respect everyone's time. Is there any last burning question that someone has for Steve and team here? Or Steve, if your team just says, I really wish I got an answer to this one question, feel free to shoot it out. And then does anybody have one last, either side?
Yeah, let me ask our team, Jill, Reid, Kim, Wendy, and Shar, if you have any questions, go ahead.
Good. And if it comes up later, you got my email. You can always send it and I can shoot it out to everybody. So.
Right. I expect that our two groups will see each other again, don't you?
I think so. I really appreciate it, Steve. I thank you, Jill, Charmaine, Kim, Reid, who was it, Wendy? You know, I mean, thank you guys. You know, it's like Steve said, this came up pretty like last minute, like, hey, let's do this then, because we wanted to make sure we prepared you folks for Monday. I thought it was helpful. Thank you very much. And if we can be of any help too, please, you know, reach out. You know, love to collaborate.
We will. Thank you all very much. We
Take
appreciate
care.
it.